Afternoon all. Let's continue our look at the 1970 Herceg Novi Blitz. So this was the return game. We've looked at one of the games between Petrosian and Fischer. So here Petrosian was playing white and kicked off with c4. Fischer reacted with his pet King's Engine defence. So after knight f6, knight c3 we see g6. So much more common nowadays is the system with e6 going often into the Queen's Engine and occasionally the Nimzo Engine, but the King's Engine was very popular at this time in 1970, so Fischer's pet weapon. And after d4, d6, e4, it looks fairly standard up till now. When Petrosian plays bishop d3, Fischer's notes indicate this is not the best move, but Petrosian did not like to play blitz games according to the analysis. He left the analyses for tournament games. So Fischer reacted here with c5. So he's striking out at the dark squares. After d5, we have a structure where if black can try and get a knight later to e5 or make use of these weakened dark squares, or maybe even play for a6 and b5 later, these are the kind of thematic plans for black. For white, with the bishop on d3, there is the possibility of knight ge2, but okay, let's see. After castles, in fact, knight ge2 is played. Usually the bishop's on e2, and now Fischer plays a kind of Benoni strategy, which is resembling my last over the board game that I've gone over with you guys on the YouTube channel. So e6 here. Now bishop g5. Ullman used to be fond of this system many years ago, Fischer writes, but now an immediate h6 kicking the bishop, so not allowing, say, queen d2. Which would stop h6, bishop d2. More consistent was bishop h4, according to Fischer's notes. If then, like g5, you know, the light squares are being weakened, for example, and the bishop can come back to g3. So, okay, knight bd7, inviting white actually to play d takes still. So keeping this central tension of these pawns. Now we see the move b3, which does look to be weakening the diagonal. So I don't know. So Petrosian is playing this. It looks a little bit strangely with this b3 especially. So now e takes d5, c takes d5. So not even taken with the e pawn. So black does have that pressure in the e5 square. But white has vacated the c4 square, which could be useful strategically later if this semi-open file pressure can be neutralized. And also there's potential pressure, you know, on the c file with maybe later b4. So without that pawn there, there's pros and cons of the pawn being on c4 or not. And also, of course, it's difficult for black to undermine with a6 and b5 if there's no pawn on c4. But yet, Fischer does this anyway. He plays a6 because he's using that pawn majority. He's now got a 3-2 pawn majority here. So he's making use of it. So b5 without a target of a c4 pawn. Now f4, which Fischer describes as a bad move. And it does weaken this diagonal. And this is exploited now. Remember, it's just a blitz game, and it's exploited tactically with c4. Because now, after b takes, we have knight c5. So attacking that bishop. Now after bishop c2, in this position, b4, which actually undermines the e4 knight. So actually it's not really to do with this diagonal at the moment, it's just to do with undermining e4 so far. But the diagonal will be significant very shortly now. After e5, d takes, f takes, knight g4 is played. And potentially the knight is now hitting dark squares as well. The queen might have the option of queen h4 or queen b6 with an important tempo game because of that weakened diagonal. So what happens here? Knight a4 is played, which walks into this diagonal potentially once the knight leaves that diagonal, and which it does so. So knight takes a4, bishop takes a4, and there is the possibility of playing queen b4 check, it seems. So why wasn't this played here with the idea of knight f2? What Fischer did may be even stronger in this position. He played bishop takes e5. So that does attack the rook and h2 and retain the threat of queen b6. Let's see what technically is going on here from an engine point of view in this position. Isn't queen b6, is that unclear? Bishop takes e5 or queen b6 are both given as strong moves actually, interchangeably, but not for the reasons of knight f2 perhaps. After king h1, still bishop takes e5 may be stronger than knight f2. If knight f2, maybe that even blows black's advantage, yes, because white takes and has a move here to play queen e1. So this bishop takes e5 here is just a lot stronger, hitting h2 and a1. And if h3, then knight f2 check, winning the exchange, is a much better version. So let's go back to the game. So bishop takes e5. And Fischer writes, white has no hope. So bishop f4, queen b6 check now, fully exploiting the diagonal finally. Now bishop takes a1, but better was apparently bishop takes f4, followed by knight f2 check, winning easily. So Fischer's gone wrong slightly, playing bishop takes a1. He's got weakened dark squares, so this kind of backfires maybe a little on his king, that this queen's quite useful on a1. And now he plays knight f2 check, which is again slightly dubious, because g5 apparently is better here. So he's giving white a chance now after playing knight f2 check. If we look again with an engine at this position, the engine is not excited to try and win exchanges. Or is it? Pardon me, knight f2 is given as the strongest move actually. g5 is actually inferior, so Fischer's notes, without the help of engine technology, after bishop e5 apparently white is doing quite well. The reason for this, check, you don't have to take there, check, in this position there's no queen g1 by the way, because there's knight takes g1, there's no smothered mate possibility. Black is better here, but maybe it's not as easy as Fischer writes with like g5. But earlier, this bishop a1 was a bit risky, especially for a 5-minute game. So let's go back here. So Fischer now cashes in with knight f2 check, but after bishop takes h6, he has to give back the exchange. He's threatened with mate, so f6. So bishop takes f8, king takes f8. And it doesn't look immensely clear here off the knight g1. Okay, he's the exchange up, because actually he had won another exchange earlier. So the exchange up here, but it's not totally clear. So bishop g4, which is given as a question mark, a bad move, because after h3 the bishop has to move back. So queen b1 is first played. King g7, now h3. Okay, so bishop f5, now queen takes b4, so a pawn for the exchange. It's not so easy for Fischer to win this, I believe, because these pawns are also looking a bit scary on c4 and d5. In fact, after rook a7, white's advantage technically isn't such a big deal. So let's go on. Bishop d1, queen takes a2. The bishop reroutes to f3, so that was a nice manoeuvre by Petrosian. So this bishop is ready, in theory, to support these pawns going forward. But a5, queen c5, it's hitting the rook. The rook moves. And now actually the back row is slightly vulnerable here. And that's used by Fischer. Rook b1, d7. And it looks quite critical, this position, now. Because this bishop, if it takes, then surely you might think there's queen e7 check. Well, Fischer had seen this. He does take. And now king h7, queen takes d7 was a bit of a mistake. Apparently, here, white could have done something stronger here. In this position, queen f8 check is like a draw. If king g5, h4 check, this looks like trouble for the white king. Big trouble in this variation. King coming up here. So it doesn't look that pleasant for a 5-minute game to be faced with all these checks. Queen g5 check, but are they actually going somewhere? Now here there might be the possibility of king h2 and white's +7. So by Petrosian taking the bishop, he's released a lot of the tension in the position for black's king safety anyway. So he played queen takes d7, and now look, it's -2 point, 3 point. It's all in Fischer's favour after queen f2. His king's safe. It's the queen's on the light square here. Can't go immediately to check here, apart from d2, which would be lost. So king h2, check, 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 check. Now queen e4. It's all over. After queen d5, rook takes g2. So a dramatic 5-minute game. Let's have a look again at the gist of it. The gist of it really is Petrosian played a bit unusually with bishop d3 and knight ge2. So this is a plan I've used myself recently, but he went in for the standard Benoni structure, not with e takes d, but c takes d. Fischer played a6 and b5 regardless. Now f4 was given as a mistake here. Now I wonder if white could play for f4 in principle actually, just on a passing note here. a3 or f3 is given as better, so actually f4 it is given as better for black, but not for the reason immediately of c4. So c4 is quite interesting. So opening that diagonal, which is used with effect soon. But first, white's e4 pawn is under fire. It's forced to move forward. Now the slight weakening of the dark squares. e5 is weak, h2 is vulnerable. The knight on e2 is not playing a good defensive role for protecting things like h2 here. So in this variation, after bishop takes e5, Fischer writes, white has no hope. So he should have perhaps just played bishop takes f4, queen b6 was the easiest here. No, he plays bishop takes a1. Let's just verify that once more. That bishop takes f4 is indeed the strongest move, yes. And then knight f2. So bishop takes a1. He starts to give Petrosian a glimmer of hope here, because he's weakening his king. His dark squares are a bit weak in this game after bishop takes h6. Kasparov has written, sometimes it's really bad to give up your king's injured bishop. Now here we have two major things pointing at Fischer's king. So he's giving back in exchange, but retaining one exchange up. But again, Petrosian messes up when he had this possibility. So he's got these trump card pawns here, and once they reach their critical moment with this d7, it gave Petrosian a glimmer of hope to just force a draw if needed. But no, he took the bishop. That was the final mistake of this game, taking the bishop here, allowing queen f2. Now there's no checks to harass the black king. There's no time to do anything, so the rest is quite easy now after all these checks. White is helpless with that bishop against the rook. In fact, it's being lost now on the next move. So rook takes g2, and that was curtains. Okay, a very exciting King's Indian defense game. I hope you enjoyed it. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.